Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Dadhood podcast. This is episode 12, and we are joined by Reece Byfield, who is also known as Muhammad Ibrahim Al-Shafi'ee. He is a student at the As Salaam Institute and has been for many years, which is an Alimiyyah program. He's also a graduate from KCL, King's College University, where he studied philosophy, and now he is going over to University of Cambridge to pursue a master's in the same subject. He is a convert to Islam, so we mainly spoke about how him as a new father, he will be instilling a strong Muslim identity into his son, amongst many other things. This is definitely one to watch. And if you are new to this channel, please do make sure you subscribe and that you follow me on Instagram at Shoaib Muhammad for more dad related content. So welcome to the podcast, Reece, and we're going to start with our first question, which is, as always, how many children do you have and how old were you when you had your child or children? Kind of gave it away there.
Wa-alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for inviting me on the podcast. So, I have one child, one young lad back there, and I was 28. Still am.
Still are 28, mashallah, good. And what was the decision to have the child? Was it that it just came, qadar Allah, or did you plan to have it at this stage?
So he was planned. However, he was it was kind of a bit of a background story. Initially, I wanted to delay having children until I had a bit more stability, until there was kind of not necessarily so much to do with financial security, but because I have a very hectic lifestyle, and also as well, to be honest, I felt like I had a lot of growing up myself to do. Um, yeah, so that I kind of wanted to delay children. However, when my grandfather passed away, it kind of brought that realization that look, there's like a generation of people that are not going to see my child, that my child won't get to see, and that's like experiences that will be lost. So after about 2 months of after my grandfather passed away, I thought that it's that yeah, I should kind of go ahead and start trying for a child. And alhamdulillah, he was clearly um, his soul was waiting eagerly to enter the earth.
Alhamdulillah. What did you call him?
His name is Isaac.
Isaac or Ishaq? What would you prefer?
So we actually refer to him as both. Officially, his name is
Okay.
Isaac, right? But we've referred to him as both. And
And what was the decision behind it?
so it was kind of like a hot topic for a lot of people. A lot of people were like, yeah, call him Isaac, but on the birth certificate, write Ishaq. And like there was, why don't you just call him Ishaq instead? And there was kind of several motivating factors as to why I made the active decision to call him Isaac. But the kind
Okay.
of leading kind of decision was because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose prophets from amongst the people, you have kind of, obviously there's the debate of what is a Rasul and what is a Nabi, leaving that aside, and we're just kind of keeping things generic. Um, a prophet or a messenger typically are from, or prophets at least, are typically from uh, the people whom they're conveying their message to. And with a few exceptions, like Lut alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, who traveled to different peoples. But these exceptions aside, the majority of the prophets and messengers were from the people whom they conveyed the message to. Which means they wore the same clothes, they had the same names, like barring a few people like Yahya alayhi salam, who was given a unique name. There is nothing special about the other prophets' names. Their names were common amongst the people. Even Yusuf alayhi salam, whilst he had the name Yusuf, once he was put into slavery, he was actually known by an Egyptian name. and that was the name that he kind of carried on. I've actually forgotten the name, but he had one, and that was the name that he was known by.
Right.
So, when it came to kind of naming my son, I thought it would make sense that I give him a name that is within the domain of a religious identity, but make it identifiable to the British people. And that was the leading kind of motivation. And a secondary motivation is that, look, um, I'm a convert to Islam. This
Yeah.
guy's going to have a whole group of, obviously, one half Asian non-Muslims and the other half white non-Muslims. So
Right.
if I give him this name, Isaac, this is a name that's easy for him to be called. Ironically as well, my wife is from a Bengali background, right? And obviously
Okay.
Bengalis, mashallah, wife's family, they pronounce his name correctly, the Arabic version. But Bengalis, they don't really pronounce Arabic names properly either. Like, and I've seen some people, they say Ishak. I'm like, but this is
Yeah.
not his name anyway. Like, Isaac
That's
would have
like
been
so left
easier for you.
field.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Isaac would have been easier for you anyway. But yeah, so that was kind of like the motivations behind calling him Isaac.
Right, that's very interesting, and I can relate as well because my wife's an English revert, and we had that discussion more so for our second child, Sarah. So the older one is Isa, and that was kind of like I said to my wife, if we're having a son, I've already chosen Isa from ages ago. It's gonna happen, okay? And it kind of works in terms of a conversation starter in terms of that one with her side of the family because it's obviously you translate to Jesus and you have that whole conversation. So in a way it helps, but there wasn't like a motivation for it. It was just like I wanted Isa for my son. But when it came to our daughter Sarah, that was when we started having these type of discussions of what would be easier for people to pronounce, what would make it more appropriate in terms of the culture, what type of girls' names would then be maybe seen not bad in this culture, but due to the way that it's said. For example, Fatima, you find that a lot of people say Fatima, and then you
Yeah.
get the connotations of that and fat and bullying and all that kind of stuff. So we started thinking about all of these types of arguments and things like this, and in that there was a lot of discussion, and I'm sure you had that discussion as well of, on one side, are you pandering towards the non-Muslims and the society, you're allowing them to maybe overpower you and make a decision that you're uncomfortable making because you want to make sure you're being pleasing to them, and rather they should take the name and they should pronounce it properly. You should teach them to pronounce it properly and they should make effort to pronounce it properly, right? So you have kind of these debates going on, whereas others would say actually no, it should be more sensitive towards the culture because essentially we should make it easy for people to understand and be invited to Islam and make da'wah easy, etc. And names are part of that. Like you said, it's part of the culture, and the whole reason why prophets were sent as part of their culture was to make the message more easier for the others to the society to accept. So we had a lot of these back and forth. Did you have these kind of discussions as well with your wife and your family?
Um, I wouldn't say it was kind of like people questioned, but it's like I kind of before I even brought up the suggestion, I kind of thought out all of the kind of avenues in my head before even
Okay.
coming like verbalizing the idea. So when people kind
Mm.
of approached me with why not this, I already had like a plethora of responses. So it was like they
Just
didn't
like
even have time
a
to.
pure academic, like a pure academic as you are, and we'll come on to that later. You already had everything ready.
They didn't have time to kind of have a comeback. I think one of the kind of what a friend of mine
But
when
did you
he
internally have some of these discussions in your mind when coming
so
to these decisions?
internally, yes, internally I had these discussions, particularly kind of the like to kind of summarize more kind of crudely, bending over backwards, right? For
Yeah,
the British lads, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I kind of thought about it, and I kind of thought about as well the the identity issue, yeah,
Mm,
of kind of maintaining a strong Muslim identity, which is obviously struggle in the West. An interesting point, a brother, I don't know if you know brother Khidr.
Yeah, I do. I had him on the podcast before.
Oh yeah, so Khidr,
Mm.
Khidr had a Instagram post about that someone put up. It's not from him, but someone put up a post about how moving to non-Muslim countries increases apostasy rates, and within a few generations, people kind of like, left Islam, and then obviously we have our our Amir Boris Johnson, yeah, who is the great grandson of a Hafiz, right?
Yeah,
And so there are these kind of instances, and these kind of things went through my head. But generally, and the way that I've kind of understood this, and this is obviously my opinion, some people can feel very strongly about, uh, feel very much in line with what was just said. I kind of
yeah,
disagree with that kind of sentiment because one, it's a bit of a fallacy because if apostasy was going to be caused by that, we're in like uh, second gen, third gen Muslims now, and the community is only getting stronger in terms of their outreach programs, in terms of kind of establishing the communities. Look at like if you look at like the pictures of what East London Mosque used to look like, it was like a little tiny little hut, right? A little kind of mobile type building, and now it's like this huge masjid, right? And this isn't like a one off. There's loads of masajid throughout London and throughout the UK that kind of have these origin stories where the communities have built them up.
yeah,
Um, People might kind of retort and say, okay, but what about kind of the identity crisis that a lot of young Muslim teens are having now?
yeah,
And I would argue that's less to do with kind of being in the West because we're having the same issues in Muslim countries and it's kind of a globalization problem anyway, that you're going to get this unless you go to like Mauritania or something and live in the desert. Global, the West is everywhere. The West is no longer the West. The West is global. Um, these things, I would say, are a realization that not so much a lack of identification with one's religion, but
mm,
feeling out of place because they haven't been given the religion to begin with. They've been given religion through a cultural lens, and they've been
sure.
given cultural practices that perhaps just look ridiculous now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
But just
in summary,
that might those cultural practice might work in that culture, but they're
yeah,
not working here for those children who have been born here and have been brought up here, and they don't identify with their parents' culture anymore.
certainly yeah, it works in the country that it's from. And to be
Yeah,
honest, even like to give an example, right? To give an example of this, we have a very famous movement in the UK and globally, to be honest, that came from India, Tabligh Jamaat, right?
yeah,
And in India, this obviously started. I'm sure you know, but for those that don't know, this movement started as a response to colonizers and kind of people that started apostatizing in India once the kind of British Raj was established. So they kind of established this thing where people would come, they would go to the masjid, and like how it happens in the UK, where people come, they knock on your door, they take you to the masjid, and then they kind of encourage you to then do the same thing, and you spend some time with scholars, etc., etc.
yeah,
Do like an i'tikaf type thing, give some da'wah. That's kind of like what they did, and that worked really well in India. Now, even though I'm Muslim, if some guy came to my house and started knocking on my door saying, "Brother, come to the masjid for a talk," I would be like, "No way, man! Just give me a leaflet, send me a WhatsApp message or something." Like it's completely out of
send me the
touch.
live stream.
Yeah, send me the live stream. It's completely out of touch with the modern context. Now, don't get
Yeah,
me wrong. I'm not being for or against the movement, but now
yeah,
that I've mentioned a negative, I should mention some positives. There have been good success stories of British Muslims in this movement where they've kind of gone through this process and turned their lives around. But I
yeah,
think the movement as a whole, or the approach, the methodology, is what needs to be changed. The
yeah,
manner in which they're going about their da'wah needs revamping, revising to fit into the modern context. So And that's obviously a religious movement. When we kind of put that into how people primarily learn their religion from their families, and that's their religious practice. So people that are kind of, they don't really know much about Islam. They don't really know much about why they believe in it. They just know that they need to go pray Jummah, they need to do Eid, and they need to fast during Ramadan, and that's pretty much
Yeah.
the average Muslim's practice, right? And then, like, the times that they're in the mosque is Jum'ah and maybe an Eid Salah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of like the generic Muslim thing. So when you get like a brother or a sister like that, and they're folding the prayer mat, for example, so shaitan doesn't pray on it, and then they go to school, and then they learn about some quantum physics and this and that, and then it just their beliefs just come across as ridiculous,
Yeah.
and quite
Yeah.
rightly they are ridiculous. But now they're exposed as ridiculous, and now
Yeah.
they have a problem.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's missing the essence and the foundation of Islam, and in the face of what they're seeing in society, what they're seeing in school, what they're seeing from maybe uh people that they look up to as role models on YouTube, on TV, etc., and what they're seeing there can definitely come across stronger than what they're seeing in their households. So it can cause some of that. So that being said, do you then have, as a father, a vision for Isaac to give da'wah, or to maybe be part of changing the way that Islam is spread to the indigenous people of the UK?
So I wouldn't say my focus for him is so much that I have in mind that I want him to be a da'i, right? As
Okay.
in that's not like I don't think it didn't don't wake up and think, okay, I need you to be the next Muhammad Hijab, or the next like as in, I mean, if that's what he wants, that's what he wants. But my kind of
Because it
main
seems
focus.
like what it looks like right now from what you've explained is that there is a path being carved out for him being called Isaac, the reason why he was called Isaac, what you've explained about how culture and Islam fits within Britain. It seems like he would be the perfect or ideal candidate to drive Islam for future generations and be
So
at maybe the front of that, or the head of that. Is that,
so
as a father, have you done that for a particular reason?
so kind of like, if we look at kind of my vision of da'wah, right? And then obviously you have kind of like two types of da'wah. If we kind of like quickly summarize something, right?
Yeah.
And this is obviously being super generic and not being the whole truth. But you have two types. You have the kind of predominant da'wah of the masses, which people kind of enjoy and watch on YouTube, which is kind of like the debates, the speaker corner stuff, the kind of handing out leaflets, the street level da'wah, which
Yeah.
serves a purpose and works well. But then you have kind of the the root of da'wah, or the essence of da'wah, which is being part of a community and serving the community in such a way that people want what you have,
Yeah.
right? So you want, in essence, the da'wah is the softening of hearts, right?
Yeah.
And when you kind of mix with the people and you fit in with those people, but you maintain your integrity, you maintain your principles, and you're good to those people will come to Islam. Those people their hearts will soften. Um, I gave a talk for, like the Discover Islam Week kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And we're in the thing, and coincidentally, it was like I gave a talk at a ISOC, and Hamza Zutsis was the other speaker,
Okay.
right? So, and he kind of, his talk was about, like, the evidences of Islam, why you should be Muslim.
Okay.
And there was, so he spoke first and I spoke. And I think as well that with what I'm about to say, Hamza Zultsis would totally agree with me. Not that I speak with him. I don't think besides that day that I met him and had a very short conversation with him, I've never spoken to him before that or after that. But
Okay.
based upon things that he said, I think he'll agree with what I say next. That
Mm.
he kind of, presented a series of arguments, gave some hadith, spoke about, like the Arabs building towers, etc., prophecies, proof of God arguments, etc. And then when I get my talk wasn't so much about why you should be Muslim, it was my conversion story. But I used that as a kind of as a means to kind of tell people why they should be Muslim, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so in that my I kind of thought, okay, well, Hamza Zutsis has kind of given these kind of proof of God arguments. I'm going to come from a completely different angle, and I'm going to talk about how it feels to be Muslim, the
Mm.
the connection with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, having knowing that you can do tawbah, knowing that you can your sins are wiped clean upon accepting Islam, knowing that you can genuinely connect with your Lord, the one who made you, the one who's in charge of everything. Anyway,
Mm.
after that, there was this young Catholic lad. He came up to me and he was like, "I want to become Muslim." And
Wow.
we were like, "Quick, let's do this right now before he changes his mind." Yeah, so he took his
Grab him.
shahada. Yeah, he took his shahada. We went to like some restaurant. He took his shahada. We done the hugs and all of that. And then I was just genuinely curious, and I was like, "So what made you become Muslim? What was the thing that convinced you?" Um, And he basically said, when I heard you speaking about God's mercy and having a connection to God and having your sins wiped clean, that's what I wanted. So
Wow.
it wasn't the the intellectual side. It wasn't the
Yeah.
arguments. It wasn't the evidences. It was connecting on an emotional level. So the da'wah plan that I have for Isaac in terms of, and by da'wah I mean specifically calling people to Islam, as in non-Muslims to Islam. Obviously, there's the word has more meaning than that, and
Sure.
every kind of public kind of Islamic activity, even if it's serving Muslims, is still da'wah. But I'm kind of distinguishing that
Yeah.
and saying uh, the missionary side of da'wah, right?
Mm.
Um, that's how I plan to kind of fit him into that, where he's capable of being positioned into society in such a way that if he is a a good Muslim, a Muslim who embodies the religion, that will be his primary means of calling people to Islam. And he
Yeah.
doesn't have social barriers. I think the kind of like the ideal person who I see in kind of like this is Jonathan Brown, Professor
Yep.
Jonathan Brown.
Yep.
When I see him, I'm like, this guy is like, he's a real like,
He's a
shaker
lad.
of minds and things like that. Like, he's like a white guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan Brown, you'd never know, yeah. If you
Tweed
saw him,
suit.
you never know, yeah. But then, in terms of like Islamic studies, particularly the field of hadith,
He's very high.
all of the shubuhats, he
Mm.
just destroyed them to the
Yeah.
extent that because before him, whilst there were people doing a lot of effort in the area, and he wasn't alone in the effort, but um, we had major attacks on kind of like the hadith to the extent where academics were like, it's just a bunch of rubbish. Like it's
Yeah.
something that can just be dismissed and Muslims shouldn't take it seriously. And it's like they treated hadith as just complete fiction,
Yeah.
right? That's how the academics took it. Jonathan Brown comes along and just smashes that idea to pieces, right? And then on top of that, he's a white guy called Jonathan Brown who's a Muslim. He's an academic. He's an intellectual.
Yeah.
He's gonna be raising some eyebrows, turning some heads, right? And it's gonna
Definitely.
be um, strong data. So that's kind of like what I want from him in terms of that aspect.
Okay, subhanallah. So, um, you did mention that a number of times that you're a revert, and I'm interested. I think you're the only revert that I've had on this podcast so far, and I'm interested to see from your perspective, what fatherhood is to you, because we know that the way that parents parent, some of that, maybe even a significant portion, is connected to how they saw their experiences of growing up with their parents, how they saw their parents parent them, how they were in their relationship as a child and a mother and a father, and what that was like for them, and the experiences that they took from their parents for however many years that they were not kind of in typical fashion 18 years, and they take those experiences and maybe they learn some additional things in the next sort of 5, 6, 7 years of their life, but their life has generally been molded by what their parents have done for them and how they raise them. And so when they have their child, there's a lot of subconscious memories that are unlocked, experiences that are unlocked, that you then naturally fall into some of those routines that your parents and the methods that your parents gave towards you when you were growing up underneath them. You transfer that over to how you parent your child. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to think about this yet, given that it's only been 4 months. So maybe this would be a session for you to reflect on it. But how do you think you being brought up in a non-Muslim household with non-Muslim parents, now becoming Muslim, what would your approach to fatherhood be? I think the simple answer is probably going to be, well, I'm Muslim now, I'm going to do it as a Muslim would. But I think that's too simple because there's a lot
Yeah.
of psychology that goes on in terms of how you would address being a father having grown up under non-Muslim parents.
So, sorry if you hear some background noise, that's the milk
Sorry.
coming, yeah.
Don't worry. You might hear
Uh,
screams in my house or my daughter running around, so it's all good.
so to be honest, you have me on the back foot with this question. I haven't really kind of thought about it in that way or kind of approached my kind of journey as a father in that way. Um,
Yeah.
I suppose the kind of core thing or the thing that kind of strikes me most as being kind of the consequence of that is that having a strong desire of nurturing an Islamic identity, but in a specific way. Because obviously, we speak about Islamic identity a lot. People think of it either the kind of really, really shallow understanding of, having a beard, dressing a certain way, which is like the most
Yeah.
shallow possible way that we can discuss identity. Other people think of it as kind of being involved in the community or having a certain name or certain things.
Mm.
But the kind of approach that I have is understanding that and obviously this is something that's unique, that it's not unique to a convert, but it's something that a convert will appreciate more, perhaps, is that being Muslim and having a Islamic heritage, right? Because some people might think, or some people might question, how do I have an Islamic heritage, right?
Right.
Because I became Muslim. Do I have a legitimate claim to an Islamic heritage? And the Islam itself is something obviously both spiritual and intellectual, and there is no race or culture that has a monopoly on that religion. So you can't inherit from your blood being that tradition, that heritage. Rather, what you inherit is knowledge and spirituality. As in the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that prophets don't leave anything behind other than knowledge, right? As in that is the inheritance of the prophets, knowledge. So inheriting the tradition and becoming and developing a Muslim identity is inherently linked to learning the religion. That developing an identity is knowing about Islam. And your ancestors in faith are those that traverse the spiritual path of the religion and those that worked on the religion. So anyone who kind of begins the path of seeking knowledge or starts to kind of take seriously the religion, they have ancestors who have done the same, right? And their fathers and great grandfathers now alongside their blood lineage, are these spiritual and intellectual giants. So if we take the least controversial figure who kind of combines the spiritual and the intellectual, is Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, right? Who's kind
Yeah.
of like, everyone wants to lay claim, right? You have like the Sufis
Yeah.
wanting to lay claim, the Salafis want to lay claim. Everyone wants to lay claim to him. But it's undoubtedly the case that he was a person who preached, who was a master of all of the Islamic sciences, who wrote books on spirituality, who wrote books on theology, and people like that, right? People that are accepted individuals, people that are well-rounded in all the fields. These are our ancestors. This is our heritage. And if a person is cut off from their heritage, how can they ever have identity? Because knowing if by that logic, or by the logic of people that think that your identity is linked to your culture, or identity is linked to your clothes, right? By that logic, look, I'm wearing a thobe right now. Am I Arab? No. So it's not my clothes. I have a English mother and an Indian father. Is this my heritage in that sense? As in, this would legitimize the claim that, okay, if you get a Sikh person and a
Yeah.
Christian person and they have a baby, it's a Muslim, right? As in, obviously in my case that happened, but that, uh, obviously that's just not true, right? As in, that's not
Of
the
course. That's not one
mathematical
plus one. Yeah.
genetics situation here. So rather, heritage is an intellectual and spiritual thing.
Interesting. So, I guess what I gain from that is if a child is born to Muslim parents, and let's say those Muslim parents have a whole kind of lineage of Muslims going back and back and back, they were born into a Muslim family, their family is born to a Muslim family, for example, it's not by the virtue of them being born into a Muslim family that that child will now grow up with Muslim values and become a strong Muslim and identify as a Muslim, and the parents will raise them up in the best, most Islamic way, just by the virtue of that child being born into that family. In fact, it is from the parents' effort of them learning about their faith and passing that on to their child and making effort to raise that child according to that knowledge that they learn is how that child would be raised as a Muslim and will gain a Muslim or Islamic identity.
So yeah, but also kind of more so, I would say that the job of the parent isn't just to kind of transmit their own knowledge, right? Because
Yeah,
if we kind of put things most frankly, and more frankly, not many parents are qualified to transmit knowledge, right? As in explicitly, like, you know, you can, no, you sorry, like the average mother or father can teach their child how to pray,
yeah,
but even in this point, bro, like, there's people who, for instance, like, um, I'm kind of schooled in Hanafi fiqh, so there's people that have been Hanafi their whole lives, and I've seen them pray, and they're praying wrong.
yeah,
As in, like, I know, like in the university world, like back in the day, that was a thing. Like, bro, you're praying wrong. You need to, follow the Salaf Salih. Like, I'm not talking about this. I mean, literally,
uncles
according
to
to the,
uncles, brothers.
yeah, yeah. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about like,
I
they
understand.
say
Yeah,
they follow the madhab, but they're not
yeah,
following the madhab. They're doing something completely way off, right?
yeah,
And they've been through a madrasa system. They've done this. They've done that.
yeah,
It's not sufficient. Rather, the job of the parent is, if the parent is not capable of giving the intellectual and spiritual tradition, then they need to find someone who is, as in getting them in touch with scholars and things like that. But not just this aspect. What I'm really talking about is understanding, both kind of nurturing the spirituality, and having a connection with Allah, and that this is obviously the essence, and then also kind of knowing how to pray, But
Yeah.
I mean kind of knowing the trajectory of where we came from intellectually, knowing our
Mm-hmm.
history, to kind
Mm-hmm.
of like more bluntly, knowing our history, but not in the sense of kind of like you need to know all the details. I mean, know the personalities, know our heroes, know what they were about, and know what their struggles were, and know the type of people they were in terms of the way in which they sought to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and
Yeah.
kind of an amalgamation of those things. And sadly, as parents, we can't transmit all of that. But that's why we
Yeah.
have the phrase like, it takes a community to raise a baby. Yeah, it's a community effort. There'll be things
Yeah.
that we as parents can't do, right? We ourselves might have character faults or might have deficiencies that we need to work on. So we need to look to people that are better than us to both help ourselves but also help our children.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm coming from, and kind of taking the kind of literal meaning of the word tarbiyah, which is kind of
Yeah.
like in like the books of dictionaries. The example of tarbiyah is literally a plant that you kind
Yeah.
of you give the plant what it needs, because maybe
Mm.
like the soil that the seed is in is not sufficient for its growth, so you might need to supplement that. And if you kind
Yeah.
of look at ourselves as being kind of like the bare minimum nutrition for a child, but
Yeah.
there needs to be more.
I had another question about you being a convert and your experiences and related to fatherhood. Uh, just like myself, my children are going to be growing up with half of their family being non-Muslim, and they are going to have to, as they grow up, come to terms and identify with the fact that they have that part of the family, that they are half Pakistani, that they are half English, and they have to come to terms with maybe whatever clashes come from those type of identities, whether that is a perceived clash, whether that is a real clash, whatever happens in the next few years, and I'm thinking about how, as a father, I will prepare them for this and how I will nurture them through this as well to make sure that they are able to get through that, whilst not shunning them away from the fact that they are going to maybe experience negativity, experience racism, experience discrimination, um, uh, uh, and all the different isms that come along with this kind of mix of cultures and mix of religions. Not to shun them away from that. In fact, I want them to know that that's a reality and maybe allow them to experience it. But you never want your child to experience it to such an extent that it starts to damage them mentally. It starts to really take a hold of them and a grip of them, and they become confused on how to navigate things. So in that, I'm always thinking about what am I going to do. I'm sure you've probably had those thoughts even before you had a child. You'd be thinking, when I have a child, I'm sure this is probably going to be the case. I'm sure once you were taking the decision to come to Islam, some of these things were popping into your mind in terms of yourself, how you're going to navigate in all of this as well. So, what are your views on this when it comes to Isaac?
So I think that obviously you can't control the actions of others, and you can't um, create the ideal situation all the time. Eventually, kind of the bubble must burst and the boy must be free. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I think the best thing we can do, or at least in my view, is literally give that strong sense of identity. Um, and the kind of thing that you want is confidence in what we have. The example I give to people of kind of like confidence is when I went to Saudi Arabia a few years ago. Um, Unfortunately, obviously, I haven't been now. Loads of COVID and all of those things, but it's back open now, inshallah. So perhaps Allah will invite me.
inshallah,
But anyway,
inshallah.
uh, when I was last there, I was in a taxi with, the a taxi driver in Saudi, and
You want to taxi the taxi driver?
yeah,
Amazing.
alhamdulillah. But yes, so he was driving me to my location, We're having a conversation. Then he's like, "Oh, you're a convert, etc., etc." So he's like,
Right.
"When did you become Muslim first, or your family?" Right? Not
Right.
even considering the fact that they could not be. So I said to
Right.
him that, "Oh, they're not Muslim," and he looked at me like, "What's wrong with them? Like, why?" Yeah, and he was honestly shocked that a person could come to know about Islam in any way, shape, or form and not accept it. Obviously, we're talking about a guy
Mm,
who's kind of like from a village, yeah, but like,
yeah.
but the sheer confidence of like all I have to say is Islam and people will just submit and like
Yeah.
that confidence, obviously, whilst that confidence in this context is foolish, right? Properly made appropriate and kind of given a bit of sense to it is what we want people to have. And I think that people knowing kind of like the background, the stories, and the heritage, and also kind of removing kind of the ridiculous bits. Yeah, and by
Mm,
ridiculous bits, I mean the bits that are not part of the religion, and even the
yeah.
bits that have become religiousized. Right,
Mm,
all of these kind of additional kind of as we can say
yeah.
the masala, yeah, the masala added to the story. We don't need that. Why don't we enjoy the steak for its natural taste, and at best we just add a tiny bit of salt and pepper, yeah,
Yeah.
just to bring out the natural flavors, not to add flavor that's not natural to it. And as long as we remove the masala, we give them
I
the
don't think the
steak.
Asians can have a steak with just salt and pepper, bro. That's why they
Bro,
have to add the
bro,
masala.
listen, then they've not had a real steak cooked properly. A steak cooked properly does not need seasoning. Maybe maximum garlic powder. That's it. Maximum.
Maximum. I agree with you, bro. I think you need to maybe once you're done with Cambridge, start a chef school for us Asian Muslims and teach us real English cuisine, bro.
Yeah, as it, yep, yeah. But look, my boy Salt Bay, he landed. Yeah. Oh, by the way, you go there. Yeah, Reese 10, 50%. I'm joking. There's no.
Was it Reese 10, but you get 50%?
Yeah. I don't know, bro. I didn't think about it before I said it. Yeah, I was gonna say 10% off, but it sounds a bit too realistic. So, you know what it is? All of these YouTubers, it's like I watched this YouTuber who's into like fitness. His name's Will Tennyson, and he always says
Yeah.
like 10 for discounts, and that's why I said 10. Yeah, but yeah,
SubhanAllah.
I don't know Salt Bay, and you won't get a discount. But
This
a
episode
good
is not
steak
sponsored.
doesn't need. Yeah, yeah. Don't go. There's better places.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the
So
point is true. Yeah.
giving the real deal, the raw meat or the raw religion, and inspiring confidence by showing them their heritage and where they've come from is enough to give that kind of what you want is yaqeen. What you want is confidence and the ability to be proud about where you've come from. And when a person doesn't know where they've come from, when they don't know what they have to offer, and they don't know their religion without nonsensical parts, um, they're not going to be confident about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of inspiring these things, inspiring those points, having kind of the foundations and understanding of things
Mm.
is where I would go with kind of having children. Obviously, when they're like 5, it doesn't really matter too much, right? But when they're a bit older and they can kind of understand things a bit more, having that strong
I can
foundation in
imagine you
things.
taking Isaac to the park and he's on the swings and you're trying to explain to him the arguments against atheism and going into the differences of aqidah and all of this kind of
Uh,
stuff,
uh,
mashallah.
yeah, yeah, like let's push him on the swing. You see that guy? He's a deviant.
Okay, we're back after we had some technical changes. You can see Reese has got his headphones on now, mashallah. So we were about to jump into a different discussion anyway, which is going into your story, I guess. I mean, the story is just starting. on being accepted to University of Cambridge. I understand that you've now, alhamdulillah, enrolled and visited, so everything is just going to start now. So what were some of the motivations behind going to study at Cambridge? What are you studying as well? And we'll try and relate this back to fatherhood afterwards.
So when I was in my second or third year of Alimiyyah, I was kind of really inspired by a lot of my teachers there who are like academics, and they've got degrees, but they're also traditionally trained. At first I kind of decided, okay, what would I do? So I enrolled into a university known as Revert College in London. It's between SOAS and UCL, and I enrolled to their philosophy degree. And
Okay.
I'm going to super summarize this story because this story can be quite long, but I'm going to summarize it. Whilst I was
So
there,
just to clarify, you going to Birkbeck is you've started studying your Alimiyyah. You haven't
Yeah.
yet got a traditional university degree, and
No.
now through some of these inspirations that you're seeing and these arguments that you're seeing, you're becoming motivated to go and get this degree.
yeah.
Okay.
So I started at Birkbeck, and whilst I was at Birkbeck, I was working literally across the road from King's, and
Right.
I was listening to a podcast by this philosopher known as Peter Adamson, and he does his podcast is called History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps. He's a very cool guy. I'd recommend people, if they want to learn about philosophy in kind of like a friendly and bite-sized way, his podcast is really good, to the extent that his podcast has now become books. But yeah, so I was listening to his podcast, and his podcast at the beginning of it is, sponsored by the King's College Philosophy Department, etc., etc.
Right.
So I was kind of getting in my head that, and this kind of inspired the idea of, okay, well, what about if I take this desire of kind of, getting educated in a particular field and take it a bit further and say that, look, okay, we have this intention of da'wah, right? And the height of doing this da'wah, or this kind of efforts, is going into academia, becoming a professor, being at the top of the food chain, yeah? And that's where we're going to achieve the most. And what this also does is, this then now aligns my Islamic efforts, my personal interests, and a career. So I kind of put all of them into one and streamline them.
Very interesting.
And I thought to myself, okay, well, if I want to succeed in this and actually have, essentially, if I'm going to do well in my da'wah efforts, my voice has to have some credibility, isn't it? I need to be someone that people are going to listen to. So yeah, being credible, being taken seriously by the academic community, so the whole da'wah effort can be taken, I need to go to a Russell Group university. So whilst kind of staring down at King's and from my workplace window and listening to the podcast, I was like, why don't I apply to King's? And you have to contextualize this, that this is kind of a bit of a dream at the moment. Yeah. As in, we went from not having a degree to kind of getting a degree at like a nighttime university whilst working and being married, working full time and doing Islamic studies, right? To now going to kind of King's, which is like, I think it's like one of the top 10 unis in the UK. And I think it's like in the top 30 in the world. So we're kind of like, being a bit ambitious at this stage. So I made an application and they made me an offer. And bro, when I tell you the offer was a joke. Yeah. Like, as in, like, like, if you really don't like someone, yeah, but you can't say no.
Yeah.
So you want to give them something, you want to make it impossible for them. Yeah. Yeah. They said to me, in your first year, when you finish Birkbeck, in your first year, you need to get 70% overall, and you have to get 70% in each module.
Wow.
Like, who does that? Who achieves that in the first year? Like, it's a joke.
That is mad.
So, honestly, So obviously, I got into Kings, right? And
Alhamdulillah.
the this is why, and this is the kind of mantra at this point, is that look, the whole time, wallahi, I had the intention of this da'wah effort. And the only reason I got into Kings is because it was purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously it's hard to maintain to maintain intentions, right? And it's hard to, and when you have like intentions for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shaitan will come at you and attack you. But it's important, obviously, regardless of being attacked, wavering from the path, that you have to come back and you remain firm on your intention and get back to where you were. And because of dua and that intention being for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I was successful in that. And obviously, one of the greatest blessings of the academic calendar in our current time period is that Ramadan falls during exam season. Yeah. So literally, bro, every night in Taraweeh, I was making dua, to the extent where that like it was a very beautiful experience, just making dua regularly. And then and like, people make dua, right? We make dua, I make dua, and sometimes it's kind of like sometimes it feels a bit trivial. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you're just making a routine dua for stuff. But when you genuinely want something, and you genuinely have in your heart that Allah is the one who can give it to you, and more so when you want that thing for Allah, you're doing it for Allah. Like, for instance, say you really want to do Hajj, right? You really want to go to Hajj, and the reason why you want to do it is not for anything else other than to fulfill the obligation. And you want to fulfill that obligation to be closer to Allah.
Yeah.
You make dua for, guarantee anyone in this scenario, I guarantee you, if you do that with these intentions, you will be going to Hajj. If you do it now, before the Hajj season comes, you'll be going Hajj this year. I guarantee it's the case. And that's the case in this scenario. And that's how I got to Kings. And to summarize, the same thing again, and now we're in Cambridge. and
Allahu Akbar.
and I want, for those that listen to this, it is very important to understand that if we go back to the beginning of the story, the guy with no degree, the guy who didn't really, like, bro, before I was Muslim, yeah, people said to me in school, like teachers and stuff, you're smart, but you need to do more effort. Yeah, you need to try. Bro, I was the guy that done no effort. Yeah, like
Academia was basically like all the way over there. It was not even in the vision.
Bro, imagine this here, for my GCSEs, like the GCSE exams were like, some of them were like 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Bro, I bunked the first hour of one of my GCSE exams. Yeah. I was like, I can't, boys. Hours too long. Bro, check this. In my English GCSE, I took a nap. Yeah. Bro, I was like the worst student. Yeah.
Are you sure you want this to come out? Yeah, because Cambridge might see this.
It's too late now. Like, we're in. The fees, inshallah, have been paid. They can't. I mean, maybe delay releasing this until 9 months, right, when the degree's finished. Yeah? But I would say that it was once, as in, the point is, look at who this person was, and then kind of finding a vision, developing the vision, and then doing it, and your vision being for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only did Allah facilitate it, but Allah facilitated the change in me to become a student, to become a good student, right? Where I'm like staying on the top of deadlines, I'm smashing them out, I'm doing them here, I'm doing them there. And then kind of like the next kind of miraculous thing is that obviously I'm working in my first and second year. And then in my third year, obviously, I'm, young Isaac is on the way. Yeah. I'm something flopped with my work where instead of working part time, I had to work full time for the whole of the first semester.
Wow.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, my wife had severe morning sickness.
Subhanallah.
Like, and because of like the whole COVID situation, everything, like she didn't even get medicine, the anti-sickness tablets. She
Yeah.
didn't even get that for a couple months. Like there was like, and she didn't even. I think I don't even remember the exact date, but we were like, we didn't even like, like you have the time scale for the
Yeah.
scans. We were like seriously late, where I think by the second scan they told us the gender. That's how late.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's yeah.
like the NHS kind of, well, not the NHS, but the hospital kind of messed up in the process, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of things happening, right? But because of the sincerity and the dua in the intention being for the sake of Allah, Allah facilitated it taking place, but also made the changes in me to be the type of person to achieve it.
Yeah. Despite all of those factors that could have thrown you off, you were still able to, Allah facilitated for you to take those on and still to face them with the sincerity and keep going through forth with them. And that actually leads me, go on.
So to the extent that one of my friends, I think I told you this before, but one of my friends basically said that I'm like the Elon Musk of productivity. Yeah. where basically I had a full-time job, my wife was pregnant, and then obviously whilst I was doing my dissertation, he was born.
Yeah.
And I was doing my Islamic studies. I was teaching classes as well. So I was
Wow.
teaching a theology class, Aqidah class, which I teach for free. And I can't even remember everything that I was doing, but a bunch of other stuff, right? And kind of like the process of thing. Obviously, imagine you have to take a break in writing your dissertation because your wife's in labor. Your wife's in labor. It's in COVID, right? So your women are only allowed one birthing partner, and that's
Yeah.
me. So I'm
Yeah.
there. We don't have any help for that time period until we get home.
Yeah.
And obviously, and then when he was
And you're
born,
there with your laptop next to her while she's giving birth.
bro, no,
typing away.
there was no laptop for that time period. I had 2 weeks where I didn't get any work done, basically.
Wow. Subhanallah.
But yeah, so that was only possible by obviously Allah's tawfiq, and obviously Allah inspiring into me and changing me to be a person who's capable of dealing with that, basically. And this is obviously for Cambridge. I'm a good student now. Don't kick me out. Don't listen to Shoaib.
Subhanallah. That's I mean, whilst listening to, I'm just reflecting upon my when my wife got pregnant. I was doing a master's at the time, and she was still finishing off her degree, and we were really struggling to keep up with our studies. And to be honest, we took the decision to take a pause from university whilst that was happening, because I was working full time doing my masters part time, and then my wife falling pregnant. We had to find our own place to move into, and I was on a really low salary as well at that point. And so we had to move out of London, away from family. So all of those things combined, I just felt like I couldn't carry on my studies. So you saying that reminds me of that stage, and it's amazing and inspiring to see that you were able to go through it and still kind of manage to get through it, basically, and end up now, alhamdulillah, going for your masters at Cambridge University. But that being said, you now doing starting a path in Cambridge University is going to pose its own challenges, because you have the baby now as well, right? Of course, having your wife being pregnant is one thing whilst doing your dissertation and in your final year of your undergraduate studies, but this is also another challenge, having a newborn baby whilst doing your postgraduate studies. So how do you imagine that this is going to go? And you being Abu Productive, or the Elon Musk of productivity, how do you think that you're going to manage all of that as being a dad, starting a master's, not in any institute, Cambridge? You were saying how you might need to move towards Cambridge as well.
Yeah.
So all of these things combined, I can imagine it can be quite difficult, but you've faced difficulty already and got through it. So you seem confident, but I want to know how you're going to do it.
So have you heard of Pomodoros?
Yes.
So yeah, so for those that don't know,
25
Pomodoros
minutes.
Yeah, 25
Yeah.
minutes, 5-minute break, and then carry on, yeah? So
Yeah.
so that's what I do. I tell my son, you get 25 minutes of my time. No, it's okay.
I really thought you were going to say, yeah, I'm going to study for 25 minutes. That's a true productive master, mashallah. Even your baby has to follow your productivity rules.
No, that definitely would not work. No, so with that kind of like the whole productivity thing, like I am certainly not the Elon Musk of productivity. I view myself as like the least productive guy I know. Yeah.
Right.
So just to clarify that was just kind of a hyperbolic statement of how it was a difficult time. Not that I'm super productive. I think I'm a person that just works well under pressure.
Okay.
But how am I going to manage this? I would say the first 2 months, particularly the first month of fatherhood, is probably, and you know, each hurdle is different, but that was probably the most difficult time, right? Because
in comparison to all these things that you just explained.
Yeah, as in that was crunch time for university. That was like
Right,
all
okay,
of this stuff.
okay, yeah.
But more specifically, with him as you know, having a son, being a father, that was the most difficult time, because one, for like the first 2 weeks, my wife was like out of it, right? So I was like mum and dad for the first 2 weeks. Then and then obviously now after that I tagged her back in and said, please, now I need a timeout. Yes. So like we obviously that was kind of like the difficult part, going from like sleeping whenever you want to sleep to sleeping no sleep. Yeah, basically you do pomodoros with your sleep now. Yeah. Basically just operating on no sleep, not being able to focus, that kind of stuff, where now alhamdulillah, like there's a level of routine. Yeah, it's not that, you know, you have all this free time, you can do what you want. It's like maybe you get like an hour in the night where you can do what you want, but the rest of the day is kind of like, you know, spending time with him here and there. You know, mum takes a turn, I take a turn, mum takes a turn, I take a turn, things like that. But generally for me, I can function if I get sleep. If I don't get sleep, I can't function. My ability to do things is very dependent upon my sleep. So now where he's kind of starting to develop a routine, and he'll sleep a bit, like he'll get a good night's sleep, as opposed to waking up every 2 hours. Yeah. And for those of you that don't have children, people think, oh, they're like, oh, babies are meant to be sleeping like 20 hours a day, this, and it feels like they sleep 1 hour. Yeah. or they like they'll sleep for, you'll feed them, they'll it takes another half an hour, so it takes like half an hour to feed them, half an hour to put them back to sleep. You need to do, and in that half an hour you got to do a nappy change, you got to do this, you got to do that, and then it's the half an hour to put them to sleep, and then obviously it's been like an hour and a half, so now they get half an hour nap, and then they wake up again. So when I say they literally wake up every 2 hours, it's literally every 2 hours, right? That's how like the first month is, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's really difficult. But now, kind of moving forward, it's like, okay, well, he's got a bit of a pattern. I need to understand when I need to start doing my work. When is my time to work and when is my time not to work. And just kind of finding out where I can fit university with him, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I'm hopeful that inshallah it will be easier because based upon how Cambridge is, it's like I have my big dissertation, right? And then I have 2 other modules. So it's like the workload is a lot less.
Okay.
And I have 1 module per semester, and then obviously the dissertation throughout the year. 3 modules. 1 in the first semester, 2 in the second semester. And that's a lot easier than focusing on 3 or 4 modules per term.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
inshallah, given that he has a better sleeping pattern, he is a little bit more independent in the sense of he can kind
Yeah.
of play with himself a bit.
Yeah.
Inshallah, it will be. I'm scared to say easier, not easier, but more feasible.
Inshallah, may Allah make it easy. So,
Ameen.
bro, just to wrap up and end off here, I'm interested to know in these 4 months, what is maybe the biggest thing that you've learned from being a father so far? There's obviously going to be so much more to come, and you can't, 4 months is a short amount of time in comparison to how many years you would potentially be a father. But this is a fresh new experience, so there must have been some reflections that you've had in these past couple of months, and at least one of them I'd like you to share.
It's difficult to choose one, but I suppose I should choose the one that is the most important for the most number of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, until you have children, you don't appreciate your parents. You don't value them in the same way. May I add a second reflection, which is equally good?
Yeah.
I'll make it quick, I promise. But to
Yeah.
finish this one up, that the effort that parents have to go through and continue to go through, it's only then you appreciate what your parents did for you and how they managed it, and then the extent to which regardless of whether or not we agree or disagree with the decisions they made, or the decisions they continue to make, or how the things that they want for you, we still need to be grateful to them. And even if our parents did make mistakes, one thing that is clear is that, bro, like, there isn't like a kind of Wikipedia page or a walkthrough on parenthood. A lot of it is you learn as you go. You just kind of figure it out. And definitely our parents had the same thing. So reflect on kind of the gratitude that we need to have towards our parents. So my second reflection is kind of based upon my perceived perception of what it's like to be a baby. Because obviously we don't remember our own, right? But if you think about a baby's life, it's kind of humiliating. Yeah, you need someone to feed you. You need someone to change your nappy. If they don't change you, you're just sitting in your own like dirt for however long. It's not very nice, and it just kind of reminds you on how dependent we are on everything.
Yeah.
And how even our parents, even us as parents now, we're dependent on so many different things. And were those things not there, we wouldn't be able to survive. And kind of zooming out, it's kind of an analogy for life itself. That everything that exists is dependent. And it's just the ultimate reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even if we reflect deeply, our children are a reflection of our frailty, our dependence, and need for nurturing. And essentially, we're no different from our children. Though we have what appears to be dependence in certain things, ultimately we're dependent upon society, and society is dependent on other things.
Yeah.
And we're all in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's my final reflection.
Jazakallah khair for coming on. I
Barakallah.
really appreciate it. Alhamdulillah, it was a really good discussion, and inshallah, if you are able to, we'll have you on again. Maybe once you've
inshallah.
finished with your Cambridge degree, you can come back on and give us some reflections on how it went and if it was more feasible.
Inshallah. I'll let you know. Make dua for me.
Definitely, inshallah. And we're gonna have in the description, you will see that there is a link below which it will explain to you more about why Reece is going to Cambridge, and you can contribute towards some of the costs of this as well, and inshallah gain the reward of all the work that he will be doing once he finishes his degree and carries on into the future, inshallah. But yeah, click on the link and you'll find out more from there. Jazakallah khair. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.